It is my great honor to welcome all of you, our founding families and distinguished faculty, our school leadership and devoted board members, our many supporters and longtime friends, to the inaugural convocation of Emet Classical Academy. At critical moments in the Jewish story, the Jewish people have heard the summons of history by founding a school. Today we hear that summons once again at a moment of great consequence for Jewish civilization, for the American Republic, and for the Western world. Our name, Emet, is the Hebrew word for truth. And as we begin this generational mission of founding and forming the hearts and minds and souls of our Emet students, we dedicate ourselves to 4 important truths that will shape our culture and our purpose. First, we believe in the pursuit of human excellence, in appreciating the truth-seeking spirit of Socrates, the architecture of Rome and heaven-gazing discoveries of Galileo, the transcendent beauty of Rembrandt's paintings and the elation of Mozart's music, the manners and morals of Jane Austen, and the spiritual realism of Dostoevsky, the genius of Einstein and the innovative spirit of Edison. We also know that the heights of human excellence always begin low to the ground. To read and perhaps one day even write like Shakespeare, our children need to master the arts of grammar and language. To listen and perhaps one day play like Rachmaninoff, our children need to master the notes and the scales. To uncover and perhaps one day even marshal the mysteries of nature, our children need to understand the wonderful workings of the created world. At Emet, our gaze will look beyond to the heights of human excellence, but we will never forget the patience, discipline, and devotion that it takes to reach those heights, one letter, one note, and one brushstroke at a time. The second truth at the heart of Emet is the belief that the Jewish people have an exceptional role to play in the human story. Through Abraham, a moral vision of mankind was revealed to the world. Through Moses, a righteous way of life was imparted to the Israelites and now to us. Through David, the deepest yearnings of the human heart found their clearest voice. At Emet, we believe that the Jewish people have a sacred responsibility for renewing the moral and cultural spirit of Western civilization. As Jews, we cannot retreat, we cannot assimilate, we cannot pretend that our wayward postmodern culture will just be fine without our Hebraic voice. As Jews, we must hear the shofar call of the current age. Emet students, you will hear that call. The third truth at the heart of Emet is that our future depends on the next generation of great leaders, and that great leaders must draw upon the hard-won lessons of history. That is why on our classroom walls we have pictures of figures like Frederick Douglass and Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Herzl. This is why our curriculum will put biographies of statesmen and inventors, judges and scholars, entrepreneurs and poets and rabbis at the heart of our seminar learning. Our students need models of excellence to emulate and to admire. And when their time comes, when your time comes, Emet graduates will stand tall on the shoulders of giants. The final truth at the heart of Emet is that human greatness is rightly nurtured by human goodness, and even, dare I say, by the life of holiness. We want Emet graduates to recognize that civility matters, that honoring fathers and mothers and teachers matters, that comforting the sick matters, that friendship matters, and that above all, devotion to family matters. Greatness in the service of goodness, that is the Emet way. In the darkest moments of history, there is no more hopeful act than founding a new school, as we link the treasured traditions of our past with the faith we rightly place in our children. All around us, we are watching the Western world and American civilization weaken or abandon its own majestic inheritance. If we are successful, and we will be, Emet will stand athwart the erosion of our culture, yelling, "Stop." We will show our students a better way. We will be a light unto the nations. This Emet way will require patience and discipline. It is the long way, traveling from the recovered greatness of our ancestors to the awesome possibilities of the present, to our solemn responsibility for the future. The Emet way is a joyful way, but it is not the easy way. This hopeful moment, this sacred founding, was only possible because of the vision, generosity, and relentless dedication of many people, far too many to name here. I want to recognize Zalman and Mem Bernstein, the founders of TICFA many years ago, who believed in the proposition that advancing Jewish ideas and strengthening Jewish education are the highest purpose. I want to recognize Roger Hertog, the chairman of TICFA for 20 years, who devoted his remarkable gifts as a leader to cultivating the rising generation of committed Jews, courageous Zionists, and patriotic Americans. I want to recognize TICFA's current chairman, Elliot Abrams, and fellow Emet board member, Steve Price, who see in this school a new citadel for renewing American Jewry, one student at a time. I want to recognize Rabbis Mark Gottlieb and Mitchell Rocklin, whose inspired intellectual and pedagogical vision have shaped the DNA of Emet Classical Academy. I want to recognize Dr. Chana Ruderman and the entire founding faculty of Emet, who are already bringing this Jewish classical vision to life. I want to recognize both Carol Ratner and the CBR Fund, and Joseph and Susie Edelman, along with many other generous donors whose faith in us and faith in this new school, and whose clarity of vision about the true aims of education gave us the courage to begin. I want to recognize Herschel Lutch and Sean Clifford, whose attention to detail and practical wisdom ensured that we would open on time and in record time. And I want to recognize, above all, the two most dedicated founders of this institution, Hannah Solomon and Rabbi Abe Unger, whose entrepreneurial spirit, partnership with our pioneer families, and faith in this unique educational vision is what made this beginning possible. During the founding months of Emet, I would often refer to our little team as the Fellowship of the Ring, a collection of very different people with very different gifts, all devoted to one great mission, Emet. Today, that fellowship expands yet further. You are now all part of this founding moment, and our success will depend on everyone here contributing to this shared purpose. And it is now my great honor to welcome to the stage the master wizard himself, our head of school, Rabbi Abe Unger.
We are living in fraught times. The ground beneath our feet seems shakier than it has felt in a generation. Classical Western ideals of rule of law, the idea of shared standards among all stakeholders in a democracy, and the sacred status of the individual are at risk. It is just at this precipice in history that a school in New York City has been born. Emet Classical Academy is not only a significant new institution on the educational landscape, it provides a real bricks and mortar answer to the question of what we must do in our time and place. It begins with an idea, the idea that rather than sit back and let the world overtake us, we can build. The idea that rather than be reactive, we can be proactive and frame this moment as a chance to make a greater impact on the world than we actually might have done in more prosaic times. Where does one begin when making long-lasting, multi-generational change? With a school. How can we raise up young leaders committed to the continuity of Western civilization, great learning, and a proud Zionism that brooks no alteration in the Jewish right to a robust sovereignty in the land of Israel through a school? Emet Classical Academy seamlessly weaves together deep academic work with the training of character needed to carry the Western and Hebraic vision forward. When I tell each parent in our school community, we will take your child as far as he or she can go, I am not only making a pedagogical promise, I am invoking the foundational premise of the Hebrew Bible, that each human being carries a unique aspect of divinity that only he or she can give to the world. Our shared belief here in the Emet community, lived out daily in classes, at school drop-off and school pickup, in all that we do as a school community, is a way of answering the call of our time. The lifelong impact of a classical education, founded upon the acquisition and internalization of the Western tradition, ultimately rests on strength of character. Education without development of one's character as part of that training is no education at all. The underlying lesson of the rabbinic tradition is that details matter because they add up to the whole and define the quality of the person. The goal of forging a principled cadre of Emet alumni who will be standard bearers of the West and the Jewish people begins with the training of character, because that example will be emblematic, both as an example right now and as our students enter the world not too long from now. Virtues such as toughness without temper, an unswerving moral compass, and clear-headedness in a society where it is all too easy to lose one's moorings. These are the underpinnings of education at its most effective. Imagine a world populated by Emet students, carrying forth an intellectual and personal integrity into the universe beyond this sanctuary. That's education for life, and a living wisdom the world needs. So, we are here today to offer the world the most hopeful and steadfast response to the question of our time. My call to you is unequivocal. We are all in this together. Every teacher, every student, every parent, every friend, every stakeholder. Each of us has a role to play. Every one of us has a stake if we care about the world in which we live. The pathway to excellence is right here, right now, in the upbuilding of an institution that will change the world.
Emet aspires to be both a Jewish institution and an American institution. And so it is fitting that we're gathered together here in this most majestic of sanctuaries, Congregation Shearith Israel, the oldest and first congregation, Jewish congregation in America. And we have the great privilege now to hear from my dearest friend, the senior rabbi of this congregation, and one of America's great Jewish thinkers, a clear voice for the meaning of the Jewish people and history, our teacher, whose intellectual vision has helped shape this school. It's my privilege to welcome to his podium Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik.
Thank you, Eric, and it's so wonderful to welcome all of you to Shearith Israel. Before I turn to my topic for today, which is the eternal spirit of the Jewish people, I'd like to begin by reflecting on education as it is described in one of the great artistic works in the canon of Western civilization. And I refer to the 1939 film, The Wizard of Oz, in which a motley crew seek the help of a famous wizard. This, of course, includes the character, the Scarecrow, whose famous refrain is, "If I only had a brain." To the Scarecrow's crushing disappointment, it turns out that the wizard is a fraud. Spoiler alert. A fraud, a con man. His wizardry is an illusion, even as he tells those assembled in his throne room to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. When he is finally caught out, the Scarecrow, mourns that now he will never have a brain. And the wizard replies, "Why, anybody can have a brain. That's a very mediocre commodity. Back where I come from," he says, "we have universities, seats of great learning, where men go to become great thinkers. When they come out, they think deep thoughts, with no more brains than you have. But," the wizard says, "they have one thing you haven't got, a diploma." And then the imposter wizard hands the scarecrow a piece of parchment and solemnly declaims, "Therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Universitatis Comitiatum e Pluribus Unum, I hereby confer upon you the honorary degree of THD, Doctor of Thinkology." Now, of course, the joke here is that the not-so-wonderful wizard takes the concept of education and turns it on its head. The goal of an educational institution is not merely the granting of diplomas, but rather to ensure that when that diploma is given, it reflects the genuine education that has been imbibed over the years. I have a lovely piece of parchment that declares that I received a doctorate from Princeton University. But the reason why that document is of meaning to me is because it summons to my mind the time that I spent with truly wise teachers, such as my great Rebbe and teacher, Dr. Robert George, from whom you will soon hear. The true essence of education has always lain at the heart of Jewish life, and it is above all the pursuit of wisdom, in Hebrew chokhmah, and the pursuit of truth, in Hebrew emet. If we have sought not only the sources of Judaism, but all of the great works of thought in history, in that pursuit, it is because, as Maimonides writes, Kabel et ha'emet mimi shomra, we seek to receive and learn the truth from whoever has said it. But ultimately, of course, if there is a symbol of Jewish eternity and the Jewish pursuit of wisdom, indeed the way in which Jewish eternity is bound up in the pursuit of emet, that symbol is the Torah scroll, such as those that sit in the ark behind me. The scroll of the Torah, of course, contains many laws, but it is more than a series of laws. It is an embodiment of the Jewish story and the way in which we as Jews have eternally sought wisdom and been charged with bringing wisdom to the world. That's a story that began thousands of years ago, a story that continues today, a story that, no matter what our background, binds Jews together. One of my favorite stories involves the great Israeli astronaut Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli in space, who served on the spaceship Columbia. And because of this milestone, he was keenly aware, before he went off into space, of the way in which he represented the Jewish people. And while preparing for his mission, Ilan Ramon trained and worked with an Israeli scientist and Holocaust survivor by the name of Joachim Yosef. And he noted on the shelf in Yosef's office, one evening while they were chatting, a little box, which when opened revealed a tiny, fully kosher Torah scroll. And so Ilan Ramon asked Joachim Yosef, what is the story behind this scroll? And Yosef revealed that when he was in the concentration camp as a young boy, a rabbi there had prepared him for his bar mitzvah and had utilized this tiny Torah for a clandestine bar mitzvah ceremony. And then this rabbi, knowing that it was exceedingly likely that he would not survive, gave the Torah scroll to this young bar mitzvah boy and told him, "You tell the story. You must promise me you will tell the story." And so Joachim Yosef kept the Torah, but he didn't tell the story. He emigrated to the Holy Land, but he didn't want to talk about his experience, and so the Torah sat in his office for decades. But Ilan Ramon, hearing the story, was overcome. And so he decided that he would take the Torah scroll with him into space, and on live stream before the world, speaking in Hebrew, he told the story of what the Torah represented, and he said, "Zeh sefer Torah katan shelifnei 60 shana yeled katan bebergen-belsen kibel oto me'arav shel Amsterdam shelimed oto likrat bar mitzvah. This is a Torah scroll that 60 years ago, a small boy in Bergen-Belsen received from a rabbi of Amsterdam. And then he said in Hebrew, and now it is here with me in space. This represents above all the ability of the Jewish people to endure, to overcome. And then in one incredible moment, he let go of the Torah, usually a big no-no. But here in space instead, the Torah, instead of falling, began to float. It began to levitate. And watching the video some years later, I was suddenly reminded of the very famous Talmudic tale of the rabbi who, following the fall of the Bar Kokhba revolt, was tortured by the Romans, burned while holding a Torah scroll in his hands. And the rabbi's students asked their teacher what he saw, and he responded, Gvilin nisrafin va'otiyot porchot. The physical parchment is incinerated, but the Hebrew letters fly unaffected into the air. This is a well-known, succinct summation of Jewish eternity, of the inability of our enemies to destroy us, and of the connection between Jewish wisdom embodied by those Hebrew letters and the miraculous endurance of our people. Of course, tragically, Space Shuttle Columbia exploded upon re-entry. But the story of Ramon did not end there, because incredibly, his diary that he took with him into Columbia survived the destruction and the fall 40 miles from space. Discovered in a field in Texas, tattered, singed pages with his own handwriting, Hebrew letters describing his hopes, his dreams, as well as the traditional prayers that he had taken for the journey. All that survived, so that several years later, the second Israeli in space, a former comrade at arms of Ramon, took those letters, those pages, back up with him, so that the paper burned, but the Hebrew letters soared again. There is no story like the Jewish story. It is one that links us all together. And to engage in the pursuit of emet, the pursuit of truth, is to join oneself to the legacy of those letters that are an embodiment of eternity. But in today's day and age, pursuing truth and pursuing wisdom requires a conscious decision. This has been a very difficult year for the Jewish people, but it's also been a clarifying one. And one of the ways in which it has been illuminating is the way in which it made clear the profound lack of wisdom that is in so many corridors of education today, at every level. For years it was implicitly assumed that as long as the diploma was given, then our ability at thinkology was guaranteed. And it didn't matter all that much what sort of thinkology was actually taking place within the walls of purported institutions of learning. We were discouraged from looking too closely at what was actually being taught about America, about Jews, about the West. We were essentially instructed to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But it is just such a situation that makes genuine education all the more important. Maimonides, in his introduction to his Guide to the Perplexed, writes, and I paraphrase, I find that when the road is difficult and narrow, and I seek to pursue the truth, and pursuing that truth requires pleasing one person and displeasing a multitude, then I choose to address myself to that one person. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have much more than one person here sitting before me today as I speak to all of you. Thus, we gather to mark the founding of a school that seeks to draw on the best teachings of Jewish and Western civilization, to cultivate in its students the pursuit of emet. It is this endeavor on which you students and you families embark this year to find your place in the Jewish story as you undertake the seeking of wisdom, a seeking that lies at the heart of Jewish history itself. There are few endeavors more worthwhile and more enduring, and that is why the founding of the Emet School is such a profound source of celebration. Thank you very much.
When all of you come and visit Emet, you'll see that our 4 classrooms are each named for and illuminated by the 4 founding cities of the West as it has come down to us in America: Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, and Philadelphia. Well, I can think of no one better to help us understand the lessons of those 4 cities and the meaning of those 4 pillars as part of our educational vision, at the heart of our educational vision, than my dear friend, Professor Robert George. Professor George has been for many years a teacher of future leaders at Princeton University and one of the great voices of moral clarity about why liberal education matters now more than ever. Professor George, the stage is yours.
Distinguished rabbis, esteemed teachers and administrators, parents and grandparents, friends, beloved students. For me, it is an honor to be, and beyond an honor to be speaking in this historic and sacred place. A place where Jews have gathered in fidelity to their covenant, unbroken and unbreakable with Almighty God from the colonial period and time of the American founding forward. It's also an honor to be in the presence of my dear friends to deliver these remarks. Roger Hertog, Elliot Abrams, Eric Cohen, and my beloved and brilliant student, Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik. My first duty, and it's a very pleasant one, is to bring to all of you, and especially to the leadership and teachers and students of the school, the greetings and congratulation of my colleagues in the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton. Our program is proud to be partnering with this academy by way of helping with enrichment programs for teachers. And we're proud to be doing that because we deeply believe in classical education. And we're excited about bringing together what usually goes under the label of classical learning with the great tradition of Jewish learning. Only great things can come from this. And how blessed you young men and women are to be the guinea pigs, to be those we're starting out with at Emet. Lying before you is a great and wonderful adventure. This school will form you to be determined truth seekers and courageous truth speakers. Truth seekers and truth speakers in the great tradition of the figures that Eric Cohen mentioned earlier. People like Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill. These are your models. These are our models. These are our models in the Madison program at Princeton. We try to do at Princeton, and I hope someday you'll be my students at Princeton. We try to do at Princeton what this school will do for you, precisely form you as determined truth seekers, putting the truth, as Rabbi Sully said, above all else, and courageous truth speakers in a time, and your lifetime will be such a time, when it is not easy to speak the truth out loud, when it's not popular to speak the truth out loud. That will take courage. And while only you can form your character to be a courageous person, this school will support you in building that kind of character. A few months before his death, on July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson responded to a letter that he had gotten from a man named Henry Lee. Jefferson, of course, as I'm sure you know, was the principal draftsman of the Declaration of Independence. Those great words that we all know, we've all memorized from the Declaration of Independence, were above all his words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Above all, Jefferson's words. Well, Henry Lee had written to by that point, former President Jefferson, to ask him, where did you get the wonderful ideas for the Declaration? It sounded so new, it sounded so novel, breaking with all that had gone before in political history. Where did you come up with these brilliant ideas? And how did Jefferson reply? How did he respond? He said, "You're making a mistake. These are not new ideas. I simply gave voice to what Jefferson called the harmonizing sentiments of the American people, as expressed in the books that had trained them." And here he cited the works of Aristotle, the great Greek thinker, Cicero, the great Roman philosopher and jurist, Sidney and Locke, two great figures of the English Enlightenment. Now, Jefferson was right to cite those figures. Aristotle from Athens, representing not only Aristotle but Plato and Plato's teacher Socrates. And Jefferson was right to mention Cicero, that figure from Rome, from which both in its pre-Christian and post-Christian tradition, we got so much of our understanding of the basic idea and philosophy of law. But interestingly, Jefferson did not mention among those books the Bible. Now, I've often wondered why. The standard explanation is Jefferson was against religion. Jefferson was a secularist. Well, Jefferson was certainly skeptical, if not downright hostile, to what we now call organized religion, even to religious traditions. But he was not an atheist. He said many times that he believed in God. In fact, that reference to the Creator, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, that's Jefferson appealing to God as the real source of our fundamental rights and duties. That's Jefferson saying our basic rights as human beings, not just as Americans, as human beings, come not from kings or parliaments or presidents or congresses, not from legislators, not from judges, not from monarchs, not from executives. They come from Almighty God. And because no merely human power gave us those rights, no merely human power can legitimately take them away. They are God-given rights inscribed in our very nature by the God who made us. And in fact, speaking of slavery, and the one thing my students these days know about Jefferson, if they know nothing else, is that Jefferson was a slaveholder. But in speaking about slavery, which Jefferson knew was wrong, Jefferson said, "I tremble for my country when I consider that God is just and that his justice will not sleep forever." A deep, profound religious sentiment that we are a people under judgment from Almighty God. But he did not mention the Bible, but he could have and he should have. Because in addition to Athens and Rome, what happened in Philadelphia, where our great Constitution was framed, deeply depended on Jerusalem, on the Bible. What in particular and above all? That principle that we get in the very first chapter of the very first book of the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis, where we are taught that human beings, unlike the brute animals, man is made in the very image and likeness of the divine creator and ruler of all that is. The imago Dei. Human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. And if that's true, then each and every human being, no matter how weak, no matter how poor, no matter how lowly, each and every human being is the bearer of profound, inherent, and equal dignity. There are no superiors and inferiors, not because of race, not because of ethnicity, not because of religion. All are equal in fundamental dignity. Rabbi Sully and my friend Eric have heard me many times say that I yield to no one in my great respect for the Greek philosophers and Roman jurists. I teach Plato and Aristotle and Cicero, and I love them. And they taught us so much about the importance of virtue, and they taught us so much about what it means to have a properly ordered soul, where we are not slaves of our passions and desires, but where through the divine gift of our reason, we are masters of our passions, masters of our desires. They are great, and we could not have Philadelphia without Rome and Athens. And yet, while I yield to no one in my regard for the great Greek and Roman thinkers, it was not they who came up with, who understood the principle of the imago Dei. We can search in vain through their writings for some foundation for the principle of the profound, inherent, and equal dignity of each and every member of the human family. We won't find it. That's why Jerusalem was necessary, indispensable. You do not get, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, if we're simply in Philadelphia relying on Athens and Rome. We need Jerusalem, that great insight. Now, we Jews and Christians who regard ourselves as the heirs of that insight, that great Jewish insight, we have never, individually or corporately, fully lived up to the requirements of the imago Dei. We have always, to some extent, failed. You see Jefferson wrestling with this about slavery. He knew that slavery was incompatible with the imago Dei principle. And yet he could not give up his own slaves. He could not bring himself to turn decisively against slavery. But although we have never fully lived up to it, our great experiment in ordered liberty and republican government, that great gift that came from Philadelphia, is only possible and can only be maintained if we strive to live up to that principle of inherent and equal dignity. And that task falls to all of us. This is not just the task of rabbis or priests or preachers. It's not just the task of professors or teachers. Certainly not just the task of presidents and congressmen and senators and judges and justices. It's the task of all of us. We have to understand that meaning. We have to integrate it into our own character and our own understanding. And then we have to be the courageous truth speakers who proclaim it to the world. You students of Emet have before you the opportunity and the sacred obligation to form yourselves with the support and assistance of your teachers in such a way that you can uphold this precious experiment. It is an experiment. It could fail. We must not let it fail, this experiment in republican government and ordered liberty and human equality, something so rare in all of human history. But to do that, to keep the flame of Philadelphia aloft, It is absolutely indispensable, even in this so-called secular age, that you keep the flame of Jerusalem aloft. This was the great gift given to you, given first to the Jewish people, first to hear and respond to the Word of God. And this is not something only for the past, for history, for ancestors. That mission to keep the flame of Jerusalem aloft falls to me and to your teachers and to your parents and to your rabbis, and it falls to you. Do not let the flame fall. Thank you.
One of the things that defines America's uniqueness in the story of the West is our entrepreneurial spirit. Well, I've met few people more entrepreneurial than my great friend and one of the indispensable founders of Emet, Hannah Solomon. And among the many gifts that she's brought to this school is an understanding that if we are in the business of appreciating human excellence, we have to start by looking to music. For it is music that elevates the soul, that enlarges our imagination, that stirs the human spirit. Hannah, I want to give you the podium now to introduce the musical culmination of our time together today.
Less than a year ago, this school still was not in existence, and today it's a reality. It was still a dream. And before I introduce our musical guests, I just wanted to say I am so grateful to the parents for having the support, the belief, and the trust in myself and in Rabbi Unger to make this school a reality that it is today. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And the grand finale, as Eric mentioned, is our musical program, because music is a universal language of truth, emet, and a gateway to beauty. Plato recognized music's ability to guide students toward the good and to reach the depths of the soul, writing, "Education in music is most sovereign because more than anything else, rhythm and harmony find their way to the inmost soul and take strongest hold upon it, bringing with them and imparting grace." Growing up in a family of classical musicians, my father, a conductor and violinist here today, taught me that genuine music comes from within. It comes from the heart. It's a reflection of the soul and a manifestation of the divine. Educating students to love and appreciate music for their entire lives is central at Emet. Our curriculum develops a cohesive historical framework, allowing students to make meaningful connections between other disciplines. Students will have a tremendous advantage for absorbing and enjoying performances. Our aim is to cultivate a deep understanding and appreciation of music and the highest culture, enabling our students to carry it with them into the future as their ancestors did. For over 2,000 years in exile, Jewish influence on art and culture has been vast. As Jews were dispersed throughout the corners of the world, they enriched and contributed to the tapestry of culture in every country they landed in. From composers like Felix Mendelssohn, Gustav Mahler, and Arnold Schoenberg, and George Gershwin, to performers like Jascha Heifetz, Leonard Bernstein, Itzhak Perlman, and Isaac Stern. These talented Jewish souls spread beauty and culture throughout the diaspora in times of adversity and displacement, building new lives while maintaining a connection to their cultural heritage. King David was one of the earliest prolific Jewish composers. Of the 150 Psalms in the Bible's book of Psalms, at least 73 are attributed to him. Psalms are songs. Not only was King David renowned for his victories in battle, but also for playing music, composing songs, and leading in worship and dance. Today, we will hear a composition titled titled Psalm of David, inspired by the king who established Jerusalem as a political, religious, and artistic center for the entire kingdom. We are delighted to have violinist and the composer of the piece, Professor Albert Markov, here with us today. Davide De Ascanis, a virtuoso violinist of his generation, known in Italy now as the second Paganini, has flown in from Rome to perform it and mark this momentous and historic occasion. He is joined by another exceptional young pianist, Michael Davidman. After the psalm, they will wow you with variations by legendary violin virtuoso Niccolo Paganini. Both of these talented young men epitomize human excellence, and like their Jewish ancestors before them, continue the tradition of contributing beauty and the highest culture to our society during difficult times. Please welcome Davide and Michael to the stage.
To our faculty, we thank you for being the carriers of this vision, this effort to inculcate the highest possibilities of our culture and our civilization, Jewish and Western, to these young people. To our parents, we thank you for being pioneers with us in founding this school and for entrusting us to be your partners in rearing this remarkable new generation of young people. And to our students, most important of all, I hope the words of wisdom, I hope the inspiring music, I hope the beauty of this very sanctuary will awaken in you at this early stage of your life a sense of great purpose.